For Christmas saving tips, the Martin Lewis Money Show returns tomorrow at 8 with a 1-hour live special. Now on ITV, the news at 10.
A steer on the PM's Brexit plans, transitional change for business and not a cliff edge. After a bumpy start to her relationship with them, Theresa May sought to soothe nerves as she addressed the CBI.
People don't want a cliff edge. They want to know with some certainty how things are going to go forward. That will be part of the work that we do in terms of the negotiation.
Might be hard to swallow for those pushing for a hard Brexit, so how are they reacting tonight? Also on News at 10. The Nazi memorabilia and hate literature kept by the man accused of murdering the MP Jo Cox. Beds blocked, how England's hospitals are struggling to cope before winter's even started. And by road, rail or sea, travel is hit hard as Storm Angus batters Britain for a second day.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. For all her persistence with the well-worn but opaque phrase Brexit means Brexit, we got a hint today of what the Prime Minister might think that actually means. Mrs May had gone to talk to Britain's business bosses to get them on side, reassuring people that everyone could benefit from the wealth they create. But the rather more significant comment she made was about Brexit itself. She hinted there would be no cliff edge in our trading relationship with the rest of the EU when we went from being inside to outside. Her suggestion of a transitional phase was welcomed by business but attacked by hardline Brexiteers.
For Tory Prime Ministers, the CBI conference has traditionally been a romp. Not any longer, when bigger businesses are desperate to know more about what Brexit actually means.
Please welcome the Prime Minister.
So she said she'd try to be a bit more helpful.
Is not to provide a running commentary on every twist and turn, but to acknowledge that businesses and others need some clarity. So where I can set out our plans without prejudicing the negotiation to come, I will.
Here's the CBI's president. He says businesses have another huge concern, which is that they could fall over the edge of a cliff where we're out of the European Union in 2019, but still don't have a new trading arrangement with the EU. What kind of Brexit does business want?
Well, at this stage, what's really critical is to be able to plan our businesses over a medium to longer term period. So the more certainty there is over the next 3 to 5 years, the more businesses will make the right investment decisions. That is to see the UK as a great centre for investing, both within a European context, but also global context.
She understands, she replied.
People don't want a cliff edge. They want to know with some certainty how things are going to go forward. That will be part of the work that we do in terms of the negotiation that we're undertaking with the European Union.
But the Brexit uncertainty is toxic, says one of the UK's most successful business leaders.
Increased levels of uncertainty are the enemy to growth, the enemy to decision making, and the enemy to investment. And that's the critical issue.
After Theresa May became Prime Minister this summer, her relationship with big business got off to a sticky start. They don't like Brexit. They wanted to hear much more detail from her about what Brexit means. And they weren't best pleased by her suggestion that workers should go on their boards. So this looked and sounded a bit like a U-turn.
While it's important that the voices of workers and consumers should be represented, I can categorically tell you this is not about mandating works councils or the direct appointment of workers or trade union representatives on boards.
Now, he definitely thought she'd bottled it in the face of business pressure.
We need to see genuine employee representation at board level, which the Prime Minister promised, but I see is apparently already backing away from it.
Is that a robotic thumbs up for the Prime Minister's other pledges to cut company taxes to the lowest rates of any big rich country and to spend an extra £2 billion a year on research and development?
It's been a problem for at least a decade now. Our investment in high-end automation and robotic systems isn't anything like that of our competitors. So somehow we've got to do something, and this £2 billion can hopefully go somewhere to solving that problem.
She came today to open this cutting-edge British genome sequencing centre. Now, we used to think nothing was harder than understanding DNA, the building blocks of life, but Brexit may be even more challenging. Robert Peston, News at 10.
Well, that comment by the Prime Minister hinting at a slow transition from the EU went down well on the currency markets. Within minutes, sterling jumped to its highest level since early September against the euro and touched $1.25. A short time ago, £1 was worth just below that, but still up nearly 1.25 cents. Our political editor, Robert Peston, joins me here in the studio. So an immediate impact there on the markets. What about the rest of the fallout from what she said, particularly amongst those who are looking for a hard Brexit? And we saw that letter at the weekend, of course, from 60 MPs.
Well, let's just look at what transition arrangements actually mean. It would mean being a sort of half member of the European Union for many years. We would still have access to the single market, but we would still be subject to EU laws. We would almost certainly still have to pay into the European Union's budget, and we would still have to take people from the rest of the EU.
Freedom of movement
would still be in place. And therefore, for many of, as you say, the ultra-Brexiteers, this would be a betrayal. It is why there are some right at the top of government who are very anxious that, to an extent, the Prime Minister has let the cat out of the bag, because the reality is that business is almost united that it would be massively economically damaging if we don't have these transitional arrangements. But to be clear, the Prime Minister hasn't yet persuasively made that case to her own party.
And these were comments apart from the main speech. And this is a tricky week ahead for the government, not least, of course, because of that other big economic focus, and that's the autumn statement on Wednesday.
It is really her biggest test to date. On Wednesday, it's effectively a budget, the autumn statement. She's made a pledge to help the millions of people who she describes as just about managing. Those are people on lower incomes of between 18 and 30 odd thousand pounds a year. And having made that pledge, it'll be an important test that she's seen to be delivering on that. But then there is something else terribly important. The new Chancellor, and Theresa May, ripped up George Osborne's plans to bring the debt down. She has to produce he has to produce, Philip Hammond, a convincing plan to reduce the debt, but it'll be over 10 years rather than 5 years. And it's also got to give him the flexibility to respond if, as many people expect, next year economically is going to be much tougher indeed.
So a lot more still to come this week to discuss. Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. The prosecuting lawyer at the Jo Cox murder trial did his best to leave the jury in no doubt about the motivation and the method of the suspect, Thomas Mair. They were shown pictures of inside his house with Nazi books on his shelves and a gold Nazi eagle ornament on the top. And there was evidence that he had watched a video on how to use a sawn-off .22 rifle.
This is the house in Lowood Lane, Birstall, where Thomas Mair lived for 20 years. Inside, detectives found the carefully ordered cupboards of a man described by neighbours as quiet and shy. But upstairs in a bedroom, evidence of his interests. Bookshelves full of publications about the Nazis. On top, a golden eagle, symbol of the Third Reich. There were books about the SS selective breeding programme, and about killings carried out for a variety of right-wing causes. There was also a dossier on his local MP Jo Cox, including her column for a local paper arguing the case to remain in the EU. The jury was told the quiet, shy man had researched the subjects that interested him in depth. He'd been a regular visitor to the Birstall Library. He's seen here entering the library building and heading for its computers. Internet records show he looked into various violent far-right groups. He read more about Jo Cox, whose life would later be ended on the steps of the same library building. And he watched this.
Clay shooting.
The jury was told he looked up this YouTube video entitled "Shooting a .22 Rifle Sawed Off." Was watching this preparation for murder the jury is being asked to consider. They had already been shown the sawn-off rifle Mair is alleged to have used in a lethal attack on the MP. This photograph shows Mair at a police station. The head injuries suffered during his arrest. Then and since, he has not talked to the police. Thomas Mair has been interviewed at length by police officers on 3 separate occasions. The court has been told so far he has not said a word, a stance he's maintained during a trial that could now end much quicker than originally anticipated. A not guilty plea has been entered for him. Jo Cox's parents and sister, having sat through another difficult day, will return to court in the morning to see if Mair intends to break his silence. Paul Davis, News at 10.
Now, since we last reported on the siege of the Syrian city of Aleppo on News at 10 on Friday, dozens more people have been killed. Today, there are as many as 30 air raids, according to reports on the ground. The White Helmet rescue teams put the number of dead today at 27. And the United Nations head of humanitarian affairs said conditions in eastern Aleppo have gone from terrible to terrifying.
She is screaming for her family that now lies dead by her side. Cries echoed in hundreds of personal tragedies across this city after it was plunged once more into despair. After a 4-week pause, the bombing of Aleppo has resumed, and this last week has been more intense than ever. This morning, once again, there were repeated attacks. This was an airstrike on the Al Banyan hospital, the streets cloaked in dust, into which rescuers ran unable to make out anything. Inside, most facilities were destroyed. 5 people were killed here and some 20 were injured. Tonight, not a single major trauma facility is left open in eastern Aleppo.
Yesterday, this hospital was hit by what is believed to be over or up to 80 Grad rockets. It's completely out of service, and all patients have been moved out of here. And this is, as we can see, a campaign which the regime has launched to annihilate the hospitals.
On Friday, CCTV captured an airstrike on a paediatric hospital. From multiple angles, it shows the moment a busy reception was suddenly plunged into darkness as patients and staff then tried to escape. This is a ward in Aleppo's M1 hospital last Tuesday, full of injured children. And this is the same ward today after it was hit by an airstrike.
You can see there is big damage, all ambulance apparent, all the rooms smashed.
In the Sakari neighbourhood, the damage is extraordinary, and so are some of the rescues. A man pinned into the rubble is slowly excavated by a White Helmet team and finally prized from the masonry. He is alive, but tonight there is no hospital in which he can be treated. This is a war without rules, in which every convention is being flagrantly ignored. Dan Rivers, News at 10.
And to see all the details of the ongoing Aleppo siege and our reports from inside that city, just head to our website, itv.com/news. Well, there's been a reminder tonight of Japan's vulnerability to earthquakes. One has shaken the north of the country. Its epicentre was out at sea, but off the coast from the Fukushima nuclear plant, which was so badly damaged in the 2011 earthquake. The plant's owners said they are checking for damage. Well, this is the moment the earthquake struck, which was caught on CCTV very early in the morning there, just off the coast of Fukushima. There is now a warning of a 3-metre-high tsunami. People living along the coast have been told to evacuate to higher ground. But thankfully, so far, there are no reports of any injuries. Now, nothing about Donald Trump and his election as president has been conventional. Now he's being accused of carrying on his business wheeler-dealing when he should be concentrating on putting together a government. He seems to be ignoring advice from, amongst others, President Obama.
44 men have held the office of President of the United States. And this is a city that has long been a tangled intersection of money, business and politics. But perhaps America has never seen a conflict of interests on a scale that Donald Trump would bring to the White House. He is not only a billionaire, but his investments, his links overseas, his branding, and his undisclosed tax returns make for a mystery that is almost impossible to unravel. The 13 days since his shock victory have provided no reassurance at all. Within days, the president-elect was meeting his Indian business partners. And there was widespread surprise when Trump's daughter Ivanka, who runs a fashion business, attended a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. And she joined a high-profile interview with her father, and then marketed for $10,000 her own brand of gold bracelet that she was wearing. This afternoon, a senior Trump advisor acknowledged to reporters these were uncharted waters.
I'm very confident he's not breaking any laws. He has many lawyers, accountants, and advisors who tell him what he must do and what he can't do. And he's a businessman. He is also working a transition. He's the president-elect. And, you know, we're in unprecedented times.
But President Obama is warning Trump not to mix politics and business in the Oval Office.
When I met with the president-elect, I suggested to him that having a strong White House counsel that could provide clear guideposts and rules would benefit him and benefit his team because it would eliminate a lot of ambiguity.
Voters today expressed mixed views on whether any of this really matters.
I understand the concern. I suspect that they'll be able to figure it all out properly.
So I don't know how to untangle that web that he's got there, but I agree that it needs to be.
I think he'll provide challenges that we've never seen before with his wide-ranging business interests.
Argentina has now denied that Trump asked its president to expedite planning permission on a building in Buenos Aires, a sign of how complicated dealings with the new White House could quickly become. There has been much talk about Trump handing over his property empire to his children to operate. But even then, his decision-making and his business links would remain entangled and be a potential source for scandal throughout his presidency. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
The onset of winter used to signal the start of the busiest time of the year for the health service. Now, many hospitals say they are at full stretch all year round. A survey out tomorrow, obtained by News at 10, shows that this winter almost all hospitals in England are already stretched beyond what are officially safe limits. Well, the health campaign group 38 Degrees says 98% of healthcare areas have breached safe levels of bed occupancy this year. It's recommended no more than 85% of beds, on average, should be occupied at any one time. Any more than that risks beds being blocked when suddenly needed and also risks the spread of infections. Well, at the end of September, the latest figures available, there were more than 6,500 people stuck in hospital beds because sending them home had been delayed.
Our hospitals are braced for the toughest of winters. For the second year running, the traditional summer respite never came, and nowhere is the pressure more acute than A&E.
You're driving your car and you got the chest pain.
Dr Ray McGlone has been an emergency medical consultant at Lancaster Royal Infirmary for 26 years. He says a growing and increasingly elderly population means demand is higher than ever.
Everywhere in the country has long queues in emergency medicine now. Having patients waiting in the corridors on ambulance trolleys or hospital beds is now the norm.
In England's A&E departments, patient waiting time targets are now being missed as a matter of routine. It's not just because of record numbers coming in, although they saw near record numbers here this weekend. It's also because there's a critical shortage of hospital beds into which to admit them. The figures revealed by the campaign group 38 Degrees show how that impacts every part of a hospital. In inpatients here, they work hard at quickly easing patients through the system, but every bed's full, meaning empty chairs where patients should be waiting for routine procedures.
We have to cancel those appointments, and it's not fair on that patient who's been waiting a long time, maybe for a hip repair or something like that, and then we're saying, sorry, we can't see you on this occasion, we'll have to plan your surgery for another time.
Because you don't have the beds?
Because the beds aren't there when the patient comes out to surgery for us to care for them.
And that is partly down to the funding crisis in social care. Government cuts have hit local authorities' ability to provide community care so hard that clinical staff like Sarah Green are now being paid for by the Trust to plug the gap.
Patients couldn't get out of the hospitals because they didn't have the care packages in place. So we're the stopgap now between the care packages being put in place so we can go into the patients in their own home.
Even with innovative home care like this, the Trust still has over 100 patients who should be at home like Nora, but are still taking up beds.
If you can't manage yourself, well, you just start waiting in hospital. Well, I don't appreciate being in hospital if I'm here at home.
The crisis in social care funding isn't new, but its effects are now threatening to push the NHS to breaking point. Rachel Younger, News at 10, Cumbria.
There's been another example today of Pope Francis's vision of a more inclusive Roman Catholic Church. He's permanently extended the power of priests to forgive abortion. They had temporary authority to do that, where before in the past only bishops could grant absolution for what the Roman Catholic Church has always regarded as a grave sin and still does, as the Pope also made clear today. Accusations that the European Union funds were wrongly used to help UKIP have been hanging over the party since last week. The money involved was spent during the general election last year and also during this year's EU referendum. Well, today the European Parliament said spending rules had been broken and some of the money now needs to be paid back. Well, to take us through it, our political correspondent Paul Brand is here. And this is quite a complex funding arrangement, so take us through it, Paul.
Well, yeah, because, Julie, many people pointing out the irony tonight that, UKIP spent years criticising the EU for misspending taxpayers' money, and tonight it's the one that's been accused of doing exactly that itself. But it's not as simple as that. It's far more complex, as these things tend to be with the European Parliament. It's actually an umbrella party that UKIP belongs to that's in trouble here, the Alliance for Direct Democracy in Europe, the ADDE. Now, that's a group that brings together several parties across Europe, right-wing parties. UKIP is the predominant member. And as an EU-wide party, it's supposed to spend its money on EU-wide projects. But in this case, it's been found to have channeled money into polling for UKIP in the run-up to the general election in seats like South Thanet, for example, which Nigel Farage, of course, contested, and in the run-up to the EU referendum campaign itself. So tonight, the European Parliament has said that actually hundreds of thousands of pounds were misspent by ADDE. 150,000 has to be repaid, with the Vice President not expressing a great deal of sympathy for either ADDE or UKIP this evening.
It's breathtakingly hypocritical because, on the one hand, UKIP is always criticising the EU elite and they all are corrupt, whatever, and then they do things which they must know that this is illegal, that this is against European regulations.
What response so far from Nigel Farage tonight?
Well, I've spoken to Nigel Farage on the phone this evening. His response has been Farage-esque, shall we say. He said the whole thing is absolutely ludicrous. In fact, his exact words to me were, this is a whole-scale attempt at laughable open discrimination by the European Parliament. His argument is that the European Parliament has it in for UKIP. It always has done. Of course, the feeling is pretty mutual there. It's become particularly toxic after the Brexit vote. Nigel Farage has said the ADDE will appeal this in the courts, ironically, the European courts. Unclear at the moment where this leaves UKIP's finances anyway, if they have to pay this fine, because it would actually be paid by ADDE, not UKIP, but they're all sort of tied up in the whole thing. And Nigel Farage is just insisting this evening, really, that his party has been ensnared in exactly the kind of bureaucracy he's fought his whole political career to get rid of.
OK, and that's before we've even got on to the leadership. We'll save that for another time. Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Fresh from the effects of Storm Angus over the weekend, Wales and the southwest of England have been deluged with rain today. Train services there have been disrupted, but the rain has hit plenty of other areas too, flooding homes and roads. And the terrible weather isn't over yet.
Never seen water like this in my life.
A fearsome torrent has hit the northwest tonight. Streets have turned into raging rivers, and those who've waited all day for this storm to hit are now responding to pleas for help as the emergency services are called out on rescues. In Bristol this evening, the rain has passed, but the impact of the downpour hangs over the region. Delays due to flooded lines across the West Country and Wales have caused chaos for travellers.
The communication just hasn't been there very much. Like, the fact that they can't get a driver, that's ridiculous.
And I've spoken to people on the train and they should know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're talking about because they haven't been relayed the information properly.
How would you describe your journey?
Long.
Really?
Long, with lots of stops and lots of uncertainty.
Those who switched from Paddington to Waterloo face similar setbacks as the network struggled to cope. The deluge began at dawn. More than a dozen cars were submerged in a Bristol street. Sue Anderson couldn't tell her route was blocked until it was too late, and she was forced to bail out.
Frightening because as I had to get out, as I opened the door, the water just poured in, and then you're walking through and it's nearly to the top of my legs, and it was like so frightening, unbelievable.
And this is the cause. A stream swollen by rainwater, overcome with debris, is blocked. The resulting water is left with nowhere else to go but to spill out and fill up the street. The downpour has been relentless for some hours now, and many of these cars will be a write-off. For some of the people living in these houses, it's meant that for most of the day, they've been stranded.
We've obviously had a huge amount of rain overnight. We're in Bristol, it's a built-up area, it's an urban area. We're going to get a huge amount of runoff.
A couple of miles away and more trouble for drivers. The last few days of wild weather has been disruptive, and with months of winter still to come, it could well be an uphill struggle. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Bristol.
And for more updates on the stormy weather, the national forecast is coming up. That's just after News at 10. And finally, the success and popularity of a novel can often rest on capturing or even predicting a mood or movement. With worries in the United States